Hi, it's nice to see everybody. This is the second installment of a set of articles that I called Reading the Landscape of Aphasia. Um, the This particular article is a lot longer, so you'll see on the video that it's just with various quotes, and then you'll get the article itself when you get it through email or PDF on my website. The It's continues to be incredibly interesting for all of us with stroke and aphasia to try to figure out how all this really works. And I'll read you this. This is just the snippet of part 2. Aphasia therapy calls for higher education to consider researching the pre-stroke habits and activities of patients with aphasia while just starting formal speech therapy in an attempt to use those earlier pre-stroke habits as enriched tools to be used in their recovery plan. So why it's a longer article, I adapted it from one of the chapters in book 2, what I call book 2, The Secret of Aphasia Recovery. And I wrote that 6 years ago. And one of the interesting things is that since the therapists, on the one hand, are so important, and on the other hand, are so short in terms of going in, getting your formal therapy, and then moving on to whatever you're going to do next, I continue to think what we can do to help the therapist better understand this much longer journey than the short amount of time, even though it could be 4 to 6 weeks, months with your therapy, but it's still a very short period of time before the real marathon starts. So that continues to be what I'm trying to figure out, is how could I figure out how the therapist can figure out what they can do on our behalf before you end with formal therapy. So that continues to be very difficult. But I got an email because I say a lot, I have no idea. Some speech language pathology and people with aphasia read my material. And I got this last month during Aphasia Month in 2022. So I'll read this to you. Hi, Tom. I was reading your Stroke Diary 2 while on vacation. I love how you address the principles of neuroplasticity from your perspective in the last chapter, Enriched Speech Therapy, of Book 2. So many great points in it, many of which I try to express daily to my patients, but boy, it's tough to spark motivation in patients to self-identify meaningful work or language practice and then get them to do it daily. I wish SLP grad students had read your book. Have you ever approached any universities to see if they would include it in their curriculum? Just a thought. Ha! Yeah. What she is encapsulating, as much as what I try to do all the time, this is what she was trying to do. She's realizing that what I now call enriched therapy, much more than conventional, more than intensive, enriched therapy is part of that long-term marathon that I mentioned earlier. And what she is talking here is she has figured out, hopefully by reading my book and doing other kinds of things, that she is trying to put into those daily conventional therapy such that the patient learns from the SLP while still there and realizes that, oh, after I leave here, I have to use these particular kinds of activities and use them for a long, long time, if not forever. So this person who sent this to me, she clearly figured this out and wishes that more people like her, current SLPs as well as students, SLP students, could learn from some of my work. So this is good. So I changed this last chapter of book 2 into this article as part of the second installment of Reading the Landscape of Aphasia. And it's long enough, so I'm just going to really go through some of these quotes, basically, so you get to see it. But one of the things for all of us, meaning us and our therapists, as well as our caregivers and family and friends, the brain really is a mixing valve. What that means is that there isn't anything that you or your therapist or your family, quote, tell you, here, do these things. There's nothing that can just go in and then do what you've been told to do. It's a mixing valve. It takes in all that information, all the stimulus, all the activities, and it mixes it around, right? Because you still have to be mixed by who you were before your stroke, who you are now, and who you might become in the future if you think about that, if you consider that, if you consider that there is a future ahead of you at which you must work on. So I call it a mixing valve because the brain integrates all that information and then begins soon, meaning even that moment in time, but it takes a much longer time to start to build the development process, the learning process. So it doesn't happen overnight. And again, that's part of what we have to do with the therapist, of course, is realize that for all of what they are doing, we're not necessarily going to learn everything we get from them and learn it for good until much, much later. So it does take a long time. And if you just shift your perspective, as I say here, it changes the idea of how a person with aphasia learns. A person with aphasia learns from habit and experiences and does the mixing valve, does the integration on the inside, and then comes back out with what you hope will be the learning you have now developed. But that takes time. So, because otherwise, what little information you are given, as I say here, will dissolve into an ocean of unknown needs. The only thing that a person with aphasia can do is learn, and most of the learning is accomplished below the surface. If you want to use an iceberg as another metaphor, 1/10, 1/9 of the iceberg that you can see. The most of it, the 9/10 of that iceberg are below the surface. That is how it does what it does to keep it afloat, as it were, and keep it stable. But part of what the SLP has to do is, I say, not even encourage, but to demand, like a prescription demands, right? It's not like somebody really is demanding, but they give you something, say, here, take these pills, you'll get better. Well, the same thing is, that's the demand, right? So do these activities, do this for a long time, not just today, because I'm only going to see you for these couple of weeks, couple of months. I was lucky. I had 15 hours of therapy. You've got tens of thousands of hours ahead of you to get ready for. Those 15 hours are part of what's dissolved in that huge ocean. So there can be, as I say here, a bright future for continuous improvement of learning activities, but are also continuous if they become habitual. So you have to do them constantly and let them become the habitual component that you have done prior to your stroke. All kinds of activities that have made you successful in your life, you've done that before your stroke. That takes time to become habitual for success. Now, after the stroke, you really and your therapist have to both realize that so many of those things that you had done before your stroke, you now have to do them in the future with new activities, obviously, more therapeutic activities, but you have to be doing them continuous and let them become habitual, because you're going to need this for the next 5 years, 10 years. For me, it's 11 years. It's not like I learned all this yesterday, and doesn't mean that I won't continue to learn in the future as I learn more about aphasia and why aphasia is still so completely unknown, starting with the very tops of all the healthcare communities. they really just haven't figured that out. The SLPs do, but unfortunately, we are way down below here at the top where policies are initiated, are started. I know I missed that. Are started. Um, they don't start with any idea of what's coming when a person has stroke. And yes, you're going to have aphasia in the years to come and in the months to come after that stroke. But they won't tell you, providing the information from the beginning. So the people at the hospitals in particular are not told about aphasia. And when you are discharged home, um, many people just don't go anywhere after that. So you never were told when you left, here, you need this information. So as a result, that is part of the issue. As I say here, the only thing a therapist can do is provide the scaffolding of the habitual structure yet to come. So you actually have to provide that scaffolding early, knowing that if you do those activities, the structure will come later, meaning later, after therapy has already done, conventional therapy has done. So that too is incredibly important to do for the SLP to realize and adopt so much of what they're doing as if what they're doing today will help you tomorrow. Well, not so much. Doing it today will help you tomorrow based on these the need for this continuous structural based set of activities that must be done today and tomorrow and the day after that, long after I'm done with you. So it isn't to make us better in the moment. It is to make us better in the moment, if the moment means doing this again and again and again into the future. So as I say here, the seed bed must be sowed from the beginning. Waiting until the end of speech therapy sessions to begin the next stage is too late. Tilling and amending the soil is needed long before planting the seeds. So you have to do all that work at the very beginning, and that gets you ready for what you're going to need after that. As it says, as I say here, enriched therapy isn't looking for the right or wrong responses as much as it must experience the responses and look for what grows. So it doesn't matter what's right or wrong. All the work I was doing for at least 11 months, I had no idea that what I was doing was so bad. Whether I was writing, whether I was speaking, I didn't know that it was bad until later. It took 11 months after conventional therapy. It was only later when I became more aware. That is when that soil has to be worked on for a long, long time before those seeds finally grow. And all of that happens after therapy. So you have to do all that work at the beginning with your therapist, which is to say they have to do it with us because we were quite ignorant ourselves, but you have to help, the SLP has to provide that structure earlier. And that means developing the activities that are therapeutic and they go forward, going forward. So I say here, the responsible of the therapist is to create tasks that encourage more tasks to be assigned by the patient themselves. That's why my friend who sent this email, that's what she said. This is tough. This is tough because you have to actually tell us that these activities will help with you, but you are the one that has to do more of those activities. I can't do it for you as if I'm an SLP. You have to do it yourself. What I will do if I'm an SLP is helping you figure out why it's so important that you do this today, because that tomorrow, later, is what you're going to need. And you have to build that into the habit that you had before, use that and use that going forward. As I say here, the secret of aphasia recovery is all about the doing, all about the activities, and the synaptic connections is the key. Those connections deliver the ever increasing learning field. And again, it just doesn't happen overnight. It has to be done, started, used again, become more firm, more attached, and then go forward with now a new understanding on the inside because it knows what it is now based on those networks that have been further ingrained. Enriched therapy creates more experience, more practice, more variety, and more life that provides the momentum of a lifelong therapy recovery when every day is a session day. Every day is a session day when you have 20 sessions. It can't just be that. The other 30 sessions and hundreds after that each become their own session day. And that too is what the SLP must do, is to convince, I don't use that word that particular way, but helps the people with aphasia realize that every day is a learning day. Every day is a session day, but it has to be done um, based on what I hope to be the therapists build up this structure, this therapeutic activity structure, so that when the day finally comes, and it comes much too soon, then it's now up to you. So this is what you must do as a person with aphasia, as well as your therapist, is build, if not rebuild, your habitual structure that you had done before, and use that to great effect going forward. The next section, the final installment of the Reading the Landscape of Aphasia, is part 3, and I'll be doing that in another month or two, I'm sure. But otherwise, have a good summer, and I will be talking to you soon as we continue to work on the Aphasia Nation's work in terms of aphasia awareness, and why it is that the world is still so unaware and likes to be destined to be unaware unless we go right to the source of this and drive this in, because otherwise, if we don't do it, it is not going to happen. So thank you very much, and I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.